Good morning. My name is Scott Fahlman. I'm a professor of computer science, AI, and language technologies at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And my topic today is the birth, spread, and evolution of the smiley face emoticon. I'm generally credited with having introduced this thing back 42 years ago. And I'll explain how that came about. Going back to 1982, it was a long time ago, there were universities that had internal networks, and they had something called the ARPANET that connected about half a dozen of the biggest, most advanced computer science universities. It was all funded by the U.S. Department of Defense, and there were also a lot of Air Force bases and Army establishments on the same network. So we could not only send mail to one another within, say, Carnegie Mellon, but we could send mail to our friends at MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, and so on. Nobody had actual computers in their home, with, I don't think, any exceptions that I know of. There was just no reason, and they were huge, monstrous things that made a lot of noise. So the computing environment we had at Carnegie Mellon University in 1982, this was one of the three top universities for computer science in the world. We had two big time-sharing machines with about 100 users each. At any given time, there were 30 or 40 users on at once. And the machine was switching very quickly from one to another, so they all felt like they were talking to a machine of their own. Most faculty and students, what we were actually looking at were these ugly text-only terminals, like this one here, which is an Atom 3A. These things could only display characters. They couldn't do bitmaps. You could not send a photo. You could not draw a picture. They were ASCII characters, and the ASCII character set was upper and lowercase English characters, numerals, numbers, and a limited set of punctuation marks. And that was that. We didn't have Arabic, we didn't have Cyrillic, we didn't have Japanese. So this is what you had, and it was displayed on a pretty rigid grid, usually 24 lines of 80 columns, just like the old punch cards we used to use. So that's what we were sitting, and that's what we were typing away at and writing our papers on and our software and doing our experiments. Some of us had these things in our home, the faculty, and they were connected by 300 to 1200-bit modems. These are the old things you see in movies that are going to make that trilling sound. That's sending the bits over the phone line by audio. And you could actually see the thing typing along. If it was printing something on your screen, you'd see the characters come up one at a time. Compare that to today's home internet with 100 million bits per second instead of 300. We had text-only email, of course, no photos. But we could send it to remote places, as I said, just other universities on this very limited net. And as soon as we had email, we had social media. This seems to appear spontaneously whenever people can communicate. So what that amounted to for us was text-only bulletin boards. Instead of sending an email message to a specific individual, I could send it to a bulletin board and everybody could read it. So we had bulletin boards for cars with their headlights on, lost and found, talk announcements, new papers. There were ones for advancements, interest groups within AI or linguistics and so on. So these bulletin boards were both very useful and kind of social. And as soon as we were using them socially, the flame wars broke out. Somebody would write a sarcastic post, this is a community of science nerds, so sarcastic humor is very common. And this post would be seen by many, many people. You'd have one reader who doesn't get the joke, thinks it's serious, and gets all upset, starts complaining, and then people jump on that person for not getting the joke. Sarcastic replies, it goes back and forth, the cycle goes on. And it really gets boring and annoying, and everybody forgets what the discussion had been about because it turned into a flame war. Not unlike what you see now on Twitter or whatever they're calling it this week. Tech nerd humor had a certain character about it. Here's the thread of tech nerd humor that led to the creation of the emoticon. Late at night, we were talking about what if the elevator cable snapped and sending the car into free fall. Now, that can't happen. There are mechanical brakes on the thing, but what if it did? Would a pigeon in the elevator keep flying, or would it become disoriented? If you had a candle, would it go out? Because there's no gravity now. You're in free fall. So there's no gravity to feed the oxygen into the flame. What if you had a puddle of mercury on the floor of the elevator? One guy had a theory that it would grunch up into a sphere, and that motion would cause it to rise within the elevator. You know, this is what nerds do late at night. If you're in a falling elevator, maybe this isn't what you want to worry about. But anyway, a fellow named Howard Gale, very funny guy, because of a recent physics experiment, posted that because of a recent physics experiment, the leftmost elevator in our building has been contaminated with mercury, also some fire damage, referring to the previous posts. So we all got a chuckle out of that, except one guy, Rudy Nedved, who was one of our administrators. He said, "That's not funny. The elevators are fine. There is no mercury spill. If you post a message like that, people can treat it. They'll think it's a real safety warning." And everybody's saying, "Oh, you know, as long as Rudy's around, we're going to have to mark things that are meant to be a joke." So one fellow suggested that we adopt a convention of putting an asterisk in the subject line of any notice which is not meant to be taken seriously. But, you know, that's not intuitive. What does an asterisk mean if you see it in the subject line? Maybe you're in on the convention, but maybe you're not. And, of course, there's still the problem of the clueless people getting upset because they think it's a real, not sarcastic humor, they think it's a real warning. So what can we do that's more intuitive? One fellow said, well, the ampersand is the funniest character on the keyboard. It looks like a jolly fat man in convulsions of laughter. I don't really see that myself, but then that's the best we could do with the ASCII character set, I guess, with single characters. Now, we couldn't do computer art. We couldn't make a big 2D image of something. It occurred to me that a smiling face, like we used to have on T-shirts and balloons back in the 1960s, during the hippie era, something like a smiley face would be great, but how do you put that in a single line of ASCII characters? So I'm looking at the keyboard, and there's the first thing you need is eyes, right? If you want to make a face, it's got to have eyes. If we were in Germany, we might have umlauts in our character set, but it was the US, and we didn't have. Sorry about the alarm. So what could we do? And I'm looking at the keyboard, and how do you make eyes? And 8 is not very good. There's the colon, but too bad it's the wrong way around. You know, you want eyes to be horizontal and not vertically aligned. But then it occurred to me, maybe you could make a whole face that's sideways and people would see it as a face. So I posted this 19 September 1982, 42 years ago yesterday, and 11:44 in the morning. I was probably getting ready to go to bed after an all-nighter. And I said I proposed the following character sequence for joke markers. Colon, minus, and parenthesis. read it sideways. Actually, it's probably more economical to mark things that are not jokes given the current trends, and for this you put the parenthesis the other way around. So I thought that was cute. I thought it would amuse the 10 people engaging in that discussion, and then it would be forgotten. Of course, I didn't save a copy. Discs were expensive in those days. We didn't have a lot of disk space. So you didn't save all your, clever but useless email messages. As it turned out, this message became historically important, and 20 years later we had to kind of have an archaeological dig through our archive tapes to find the original message. Nobody knew exactly what the date was or the time or exactly how it had been worded. And the archaeological dig was successful. It was a really big effort. The backup tapes were stored in a vault somewhere off campus. They had to find the right vault, and they had to find the right tapes. And then they had to find an ancient tape drive that would read the tape, and an ancient computer that would talk to the ancient tape drive and turn it into some kind of signal that could be actually saved now and printed out. So we got the message back, but it was a big deal. It was probably a couple of man-years of effort. But a friend of mine really wanted this to happen, and he kind of funded the archaeological dig. So we got the message back, and there it is. As I said, I didn't keep a copy because I thought it was completely unimportant. It was 10 minutes of me being silly, and 10 people saw it initially. But this thing started to spread. A few people started using this thing, and within a week it was spreading through Carnegie Mellon. Just the computer people on the network, not the philosophers and so on. But it was spreading to all of us who were connected. In less than a month, it had reached labs and universities in California. We had some alumni who would come back and look at RB boards over the ARPANET to see what was going on at their old alma mater, and saw this thing, and they got excited about it. And pretty soon variations were starting to appear. So we had messages with bicycle helmets, nuclear war, dunce cap for dumb questions, headlight messages, something sexist about women on a pedestal, I don't know, and a candle to annotate flaming messages. So this thing was starting to not only catch on, but to mutate. But that was as far as the ARPANET went. It spread through that very limited collection of universities, and that was that. Everybody'd seen it. It could go no further. I thought people would get bored. It would disappear in a month or two. Not 5 minutes like I thought initially, but at least it would die out pretty soon. But it didn't. The timing was perfect because that very year the military ARPANET became the civilian internet. It was turned over to the National Science Foundation in the US, and suddenly any university that could afford the exotic equipment could get on the internet and join and start sending messages. Now, when each new university came on, they had friends at other universities, and people would send them an email message, and some of those messages had the smiley face emoticon, and people would say, "What's that?" It would either be explained or they'd figure it out. And it spread from one place to another as each new university joined. They were sort of infected by the smiley and the frowny face and some of the other emoticons that are beginning to appear. Within a year or two, there were connections to research academic networks in the UK, in Japan, in continental Europe. Suddenly we're sending international messages with these things in them. And within a few years, it had reached pretty much any country on earth that had an internet. Wherever the internet went, the email was sent immediately, and there it was. It wasn't until the 1990s that actual normal humans had computers in their home. This was almost 50 years down the road. No, not 50 years. Only 15 years. But in the mid-1990s, suddenly computers were cheap enough that you might have one. And because of the internet, it started to be used for civilian things, movie times and restaurant advertisements and email to your grandmother. So suddenly it burst into the homes of regular people, and so did the smiley face. So the spread of this thing reminds me a lot of the age of sail, when the Europeans were exploring the Pacific Islands, and the big old sailing ships would come into an island, trade with the natives, talk with the natives, see what was going on, pack up and leave. And from that time on, the island had rats. Well, whenever the internet came to a new place, rats, smiley face emoticons infected them. So that was interesting to watch. We could sit at Carnegie Mellon and just watch this happening, one place at a time. So it was interesting to watch this thing spread. People want to argue about whether I really invented the emoticon. It depends how you define emoticon. There were similar things before. So I only claim to have invented these things. As I said, we could watch this spread through the internet from my original post. But my candidate for the first emoticon in English would probably be the exclamation mark. It's a symbol, a piece of text that connotes some kind of emotion. And there you are. It's not a picture. You have to explain what it is. But if you want to fight about definitions, maybe that's a good one. There were many mutations. The noseless or frog variants, these to me don't look like human faces. They look like frogs. So I don't really care for them. But then I understand that if you're typing on an awful little cell phone keyboard, you'd rather type 2 characters than 3. So, okay. I don't like it when software gets my nice emoticons and turns them into other things, though. Some people created whole books of clever text emoticons. This is a winking face. This is somebody blowing raspberries. This is Santa Claus with his hat slightly askew. Abraham Lincoln, the Pope. This is like Edvard Munch's The Scream, and this is Picasso's version. And this is an alligator coming to eat all the rest of them. So, you can have a lot of fun with these. The East Asian versions, they solved the problem I couldn't, which is how to make a face with just a line of characters. I don't think they're very expressive faces, but okay. And then the dreaded emoji appeared as soon as we had the technology to send bitmaps and display them rather than sending characters only. So why did the smiley face go viral and last for 42 plus years? I'm not a marketing wizard, but some ideas are, it filled a small need. It's very easy to say, I'm only joking, or I'm happy, or I'm serious, I'm unhappy, using these things. It's a couple of keystrokes and you're there. It's free. It had to be free. If people had to pay for these, nobody would have used them. They wouldn't have spread. So they would not have become a thing. They only could have gone viral in the way they did if they were free. There's an in-group effect. Look, I know the secrets of the internet. I'm cool. And a smile is immediately recognized by every human culture across every language. Even shallow emotion can be powerful. Smiles are inherently very powerful. Every culture does it the same way. We don't know of any human culture where when people are happy, their face goes down, and when they're sad, their face goes up. It's always done this way, and it's recognized from one culture to another. This guy in the middle is Nelson Mandela, top middle. That smile of his, after all he suffered at the hands of his government, really was more powerful than 10,000 policemen. And not only humans, well, that's my wife, she's human. But the rest of these characters, we don't know what they're thinking, but it looks like they're all having a good day, doesn't it? So what are the lessons for people who want to create icons that will go viral and spread and grow roots? Symbols are more likely to spread and survive if they're intuitive and immediately recognizable. If they tap into some universal human emotion, that's even better. And a little bit of whimsy or identification with the secret language of an in-group can also help a lot. Also, a lesson I learned the hard way, you never know what little comment or idea is going to take off, so save a copy, save everything. Discs are cheap now. Once your creation is out there, you can't control how it changes or how it's used. It's not under your control anymore. Ideas are out there and they spread. So sometimes I know how Dr. Frankenstein felt when his monster was down ravaging the village below. But mostly it's been a fun ride. The medium dictates what icons you can make. The smiley face symbol came about because of the limitations of ASCII characters. If we'd had a much richer alphabet, we wouldn't have needed to do this stupid sideways thing. But that would have spoiled the fun, wouldn't it? Sometimes these limitations can work for you, though. So unlike emoji, this thing has no skin tone, no race, no gender. It's pure essence of smile. We don't need an emoticon consortium to argue over whether, 4 skin tones are enough or whether we need 64. It's just, 3 characters. We don't need to worry about how many races, how many genders we need for the cook or the fireman. It's just simple. And sometimes the limitations broaden the universe of possible uses. This is a pilot practicing his skywriting. One of my relatives saw this in the sky and said, got to take a photo of that. So he's made kind of a smiley face emoticon. It sure would be hard to do a smiley emoji that way. And here's my Halloween pumpkin from a couple of years ago. And again, that was a whole lot easier to do than if it was an emoji. So thank you for listening. For more information on all this, go to this address. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.